it's open. Yeah. Oh yeah. This year, this is what we show. We display the flowers. When you come to the store, there'll be a row of sativa dominants, a row of indica dominants. We put the flower inside here. The customer's not touching it. They get to take this. They get to smell. They get to look at their magnifying glass. You get to see the actual flower up close. And then we put a little description. This particular one, Violator, is 80-20, so that means it's 80% indica, 20% sativa. It's up to 23% THC level. And it's also 82% content of CBD, which is great for medicinal properties. Do you see anything wrong? What can you carry this on? Right now we've got a medication, it's actually a 27%. It's a very interesting strain because I actually don't look for THC.
Oh, cool. That's a great slideshow. That's great. Cool. Glad to have stuff. Yeah.
Where are you? We're from Wanapitei First Nation. This is a slideshow of a building that we were building, and you'll see at the end it's built. So it's complete? It is completed now, yes. Yeah, very fun. Almost a year. Yeah, February 15th.
No, there's none in Peterborough. Mark Emery actually opened.
We work fast. We work fast.
Yeah. Yeah, the original. Our Jack
good evening, everybody. We're gonna, if everybody could get to their seats shortly, we're gonna start to get going in about 1 minute. Miigwech. Ani, good evening. Well, I'd like to welcome you for the second part, the second session of the cannabis information session. So we had our one this afternoon. So we're going to do it the way we started off this afternoon is we're going to have our respected community elder, knowledge keeper, come and say opening prayer for us.
Baktishamnado, Kit Kana, Wego Kishatun, Kit Kanawego Kishwensike, Kit Kana Naknegi, maybe they got my piggy to come Manogi to go. Ah, me got Chinaman Mungo. You mean young man, the month of it. You got Chinaman, you mean young, the no team now. Manda, Chitosko, and go by my tongue, my being together. Manda is not go a biscamon of the young. You got ten me go gay. This is a young and Sigis. I go with car. We spend book at the monk with the book at the end. Me sure the book says men and go. To not move off, my PA article. The business more on the old what check out the Congressman. No sap, or they walk on the yacht. Miss Miss, to have no do, you begin none. Skates we need we not magni. No sap beat out to get the geezes. Can no way go, there's no magna. Like a go cadosi. We're not drunk, the one out. Can I say go? Warm down now, there's no magna. You know, how long the show men say are not. The Mardi tot gay go, we've been again. We didn't sing go, yum the means. No, the education. We gave and this system go, yum the means, no more there in the Mardi. Go there, keep an sheik POS, yeah, chief artist. It's system in Canaway. No, Mr. Na, yet long yet. To give school zero. Pinch get. Nongoma pimmy at Wandagabong. Can we go into spoke to them? No song there, Chicago, but Manda Pigabongs nugget. It's better than the king, no sub, it's just never one thing. We have squad thing. I mean, no sub, it's just pizza gazing me where it's thoughts at the book. You shake the book, send me go. No, me go chat me go, it's just like young. I get no sap, the no team on the cases are gone, it's just like young. Mandados, and go hit about Chigotic. The book said, man, we in a Chigotic, Manda. We in a digging home Chigotic. No sap go, Manda, Mishum Sanonic, no Pamnonic, and go some down. Piggy no giat. Manda is been the game look not way with me gave in Santiago we get Nagadek Mumpy. Need the share, go in the gips the Pagana, which we know Manda, skip and go to the wind good gardic. We negate another range gardic. She spenders from the Gnome to gardic. To where go we been the game got the rush weekend got there's no say what a ghosting. We sick now the shawl and Gundaki. Manda Shigo gave me the deck. Manda Opom to go deck, Chickamau, home, dunk, you know, small, on Pigamacarning. Pigamacarning, Manda, wait a minute, I'm going to go deck. Ushmego gave to the shed up, the Shri, one hundred skip, they go and Jay Ed Ghosting. Ushmeda and shed of the king. What's the Shigo gave, no? Like you can't deny or the way up. And the no team down like be the Mardi got. No go again the target out. When Jidik Manda get the trip is over, Manda will go. So never get Nagadik. By way you can't see now. You got to go to have the doors of the same way. So another one way to go. Tigamaktaming ng Queen, Gnomdaming with the Bukatmingo. In the age of Gosselman, the Gosselman is known. High in the metro, long and three best long and pushing the army goods, army goods, army goods.
Jimmy West, Jerry. Well, good evening, everybody. Tim Almanica, Diginicos. On behalf of Chief and Council, we'd like to welcome all of you this evening to be a part and listen to this community engagement session around cannabis. Our Gima right now would like to send his regards. He is out doing his work for our community. He is out in Toronto, but he does send his regards, and he would just like to share his insight, saying that he welcomes everybody here to come with a clear and open mind and listen to the presentations and listen to the education awareness that's going to be proposed to us today. I would also like to acknowledge our viewers from Firstel. This afternoon's session, we had about 237 viewers that were in attendance and viewing the session, afternoon session, and we had over about 100 people physically present here to listen, so very grateful for community taking part and coming forth for this very important issue that we are going to be dealing with coming forth. Also like to say Chimigwas for the governance unit and the working group who coordinated all this with our Director of Operations and Shannon and all the working committee putting this together to ensure that we properly give information to our community members to give them that insight as to the direction you want to go. It gives us as leadership level some direction on how to proceed with this. Through our CANNABIS and our supreme law, it's up to you to decide on what you want to do moving forward with this. So that's the very important piece that we really want to recognize all of you for being here present to listen and to come with a clear and open mind, which would make it much easier for us to make a very formal decision come April 1st when it does become, well, it is legalized, but April 1st when it gives that opportunity for some individuals to go ahead entrepreneurship or for us as a community to move forth to pursue this. But then again, it's all up to you to give us that direction as to what to do. So the main purpose of this is an educational piece. We do have some great presenters here. I'd like to welcome our visitors. Unfortunately, one of the presenters had to, they had to leave. They have a long travel back, but the information that they did share this afternoon is available, and it will be available for community members to view, and we'll have all the information for use. So with that, I'd like to introduce the co-facilitator who's going to be moderating this session, and I welcome our visitor, Jacob Taylor.
Thank you so much, Tim. Always a pleasure to be up here and see so many familiar faces here. Some folks I spoke to earlier too said they've seen my presentation on the webcast this afternoon, and it motivated them to come here in person. So thank you for the inspiration and niceties there. That's really kind. So we're going to take a bit of a different approach. If you did watch it on the satellite feed earlier today, I'm going to give my presentation after Brian, and then we'll just open it up to some other folks who wanted to speak from the health center, and then you can go back around to the vendors and interact with them some more as you've seen. And if there's time, I'll go around and introduce them. But for the sake of this evening, we'll try and get you guys out of here between 7 and 7:30 to your families and stuff. But really appreciate you coming at this time. So this is, I think, my fourth presentation on cannabis within the Wakwamacong community. Been working in the cannabis industry for a number of years now. Started in 2014, actually. And I've seen a lot of changes in government, and with that, a lot of changes in the rules and regulations as it's gone down over time in the last, well, 5 years, really, since we've been talking about this. So with that, we have an excellent speaker, Brian Pelche, here, but I lost him. Oh, there he is in the back. Wonderful. And it's your very own band member here, and he's going to talk about some of the traditional applications that cannabis has provided as a therapy here in line with our Anishinaabe values and teachings, and loved hearing you speak this morning or this afternoon. So thank you again, and without further ado.
Amiwaj. Mondogara, watch ya dek. When I didn't cause now one day, we called what cannabis mishkons, kidok. Slang the show, that's just a slang term for grass. But the actual plant, well, net talking, says sabins. Sabisak, they used to call them. Or some people will say, oh, sabinsak. That's reference to how its leaves would look, the appearance of the leaves. So in Anishinaabe, we use natural medicines that come from the earth. We as healers, we use that. That's why they call it that medicine. That strength from the earth. So we utilize that as one of those gifts that was given to us. So we harvest many kind of medicines. As also as Anishinaabe, we were also traders. We bartered. We traveled great distances to get the stuff we needed. We traveled all over North America. Why do you think we got the potato here? So we traded. We also traded for other medicines. We traded our medicines. And we still do that today. We also traded other stuff we had here. And what value of stuff we had here was copper. We mined it. That's one of the major things we exported from here. Copper for wool. And some of the stuff we traded, medicines, was of course just beans. We know cause we Anishinaabe Imajaganet, achy bones, achy joints. We use that when we create our salves. You can make any salve you want. There is no rule. You use what your spirit tells you to use. You light that pipe. You ask. So not one medicine is the same. You could have different opposite gun, different non-men gun. So right here is an example of some of the salves we make. That one right there is specifically made for joints, joint pains. It contains some hemp. So we use whatever I feel my spirit tells me to make that. We harvest. So when we harvest, we communicate to that plant. It tells you, we tell it what you can use it for. And when there was an occasion, we don't do it again. So we use a lot of the oils from all these plants we collect, barks, roots. It's the oils we need. So we develop that for joint pains, different kinds of pains, aching pains, even skin conditions. Depends on what gishkan duck you use, the bowels. And also, when we use this beans, we also use it to create our smudges. These are different kinds of smudges. We call it koinesagun. That is to help people with anxiety. Several years ago, we did healing ceremonies for a bunch of veterans that fought Afghanistan. They came back with PTSD. So we made some koinesagun. So we use a lot of the plants we have around here that would help mentally. And they would light that up and they would smudge So that's one of the purposes we use traditionally, making quinines with those smudges, and of course, our little ointments we create, Anishinaabe would use. But we always traded for different medicines. We always did. We would use some of our medicines we have here, we get some from down south. Some stuff we don't get here, so we go. And we still do that today. Still trading all the time. But we always grab the stuff that comes from the earth because those were gifts for us to use. But you only take whatever you can use. You don't use it all. But as far as traditionally, it is a traditional based medicine. The original one, they used it. They use it for, like I said, mental and for aching bodies, skin conditions. That's what the Anishinaabe would do. And then, like I said, we have a name for that. It's not really mishkons. It's just that's a slang term, but the actual plant itself has a name. Naha, hatimigach.
Oh, thank you, Brian. Excellent. I don't see Faye. Cool. Okay, great. I'm just going to move into my presentation. Give me 1 second to set that up. I like that Brian said, we've been using this for a long time. As I'm going to show you in my presentation, our body chemistry would agree with that statement. And a lot of people who I've been fortunate to meet over my years of travel in the cannabis industry agree with that as well. Actually, the Native American Church, which has offices from Mexico into Canada, and they've actually been able to achieve some North American Free Trade Agreement exemptions among those 3 countries, have cannabis, magic mushrooms as we know them, ayahuasca, and peyote as a medicine that these certain individuals are allowed to carry across borders, 1 ounce or under at a time, as it's a part of their intricate ceremonies. And how I got into the cannabis industry, one of the first communities I worked with was Waugashig, just outside of Kirkland Lake. And Chief Joel Bear Babin, who's their current elected leader, also runs their traditional ceremonies. They call him a Starlight Lodge. Is someone who's registered by the Native American Church to carry these medicines around. And we actually went out to their Turtle Lodge just outside of Winnipeg to learn some of the teachings from them on cannabis. And one of the things they taught us at that time, we were solely involved in the medical space, was that the plant's not really going to be working as a medicine because no one's talking to it or giving it tobacco in exchange for its life to do its work. Brian, you mentioned that earlier today in the afternoon session about talking to the plant, and the gentlemen who have left and are not presenting, they describe their grower as a free-spirited hippie archetype with no shoes and long hair and stuff, but they talked about him walking the grow up and talking to every plant and breathing on every plant, and really a spiritual connectivity between the plant and the person. And I found that really cool and really inspiring, because how I got into this, again, is from my teachings in Curve Lake. I'm a band member of Curve Lake, Mississauga, Anishinaabe. All the elders taught us that every plant has a healing purpose. No one has ever been able to tell me what poison ivy is for, but other than that, like, every plant has a healing purpose from my understanding. And so that's how I got into this industry, and that's how I'm still really proud to be a part of it. But a second motivation for that was Chief Vernon Root then Chief Vernon Root of Saugeen First Nation. And Vern also held the health director portfolio for Anishinaabeg for a number of years, and some of you would remember him and his work that he did. But as this industry was privatized in 2013, oh, it's not even up there. I thought you guys were seeing my slides. Sorry about that. Tech. Can tech support help me, please? Where was I? So Vernon encouraged us to get into this. We were working for Saugeen at the time under his leadership. And in 2013, cannabis was privatized. And he said, boys, I've seen a lot of things come to Canada in my lifetime. He was 69 then. And First Nation communities missed the opportunity every single time that a new industry was formed. He talked about tobacco, he talked about gaming, he talked about renewable energy programs, and then now we had this cannabis thing. So John and I were really motivated to get into it, and this is my business partner, Jonathan, here, an old photo of him. It'll clear up, I'm sure. But his family name is Bell, and he is a band member of Wakwemekong. His mother-in-law passed away last night, so he's doing family bereavement activities and extends his regards and his love for being here, really wishes that he could be here with us. But this is Delshin Therapeutics. It's a licensed producer. It was the 33rd licensed producer in Canada. John and I helped build this facility in a number of different ways, but primarily we raised $10.3 million of the $25 million construction build for this project from First Nation communities. We had 49 First Nations invest that amount of money, and most of them sold their stock at $1.20, buying it at 50 cents. And now this company's on the Toronto Stock Exchange. We've got a lot of notoriety from it. We got featured in over 30 major news sources from it. As really at the time when we were involved, it was just us and Phil Fontaine who were trying to help First Nation communities to get involved in cannabis at that time. Since then, there's been a number of other players come forward, but I assure you in 2014, 2015, having these conversations, it had a much different tone than it does today in First Nation contexts. People chased us out of the community as drug kingpins and stuff like that, not really believing us that legalization was going to occur, was going to happen. But many of the predictions we brought forward at that time have become reality. Now, I mentioned I'm from Curve Lake, and I've been involved in the industry for a number of years, which is how I got up here. But like my background in schooling as well supports this a lot about what I'm about to talk about. So, and it all has so much to do with Wakwemekong. I don't even know where to begin with explaining that. But someone from your community recruited me to come to Western. Western taught me a lot about things that mattered in my indigeneity today. But really the learnings came here when we ran science programs for youth to help encourage them into the STEM fields. Pontiac Group, my first introduction to Pontiac was the Pontiac School here for years. Then after that, I became the Wasanabin worker at Namarand and have a name, the Wasanabinini, which is man who sees very far, all related to my times here. I did a First Nation Policy Masters, and that has to do a lot with the regulatory piece that comes second in this presentation. But as I dive into the health information first, I'll give you 3 quotes that stuck with me from my professors in my health science program that I took. First was the first day of school, very first time being in a university classroom. This quote right here, half of what you learn will be wrong in 10 years, was what my then doctor professor taught me about the medical industry. And she just said, science progresses so fast that what you're learning in your degree right now, half of it in 10 years will be proven false, will be proven wrong. And so when you're looking at cannabis, you have to maintain that same open mindset that science is constantly changing and new develops are coming. Okay, so what you knew 10 years ago about cannabis, half of that's probably false today. Half of what we know today will be proven false in 10 years. Okay, so you have to be very mindful about how education and science develops. Second thing that stuck with me was a 4th year lesson from a pharmacology professor. And he said the difference between a drug and a poison is the dose. Okay, a very small amount of Tylenol will help you with your headache. A large amount will stop your liver and you will die. So the difference between a drug and a poison is the dose. Very important learning as we go through this cannabis lecture. Last is the solution to pollution is dilution. That's something that actually I learned from my CPR instructor. It wasn't in the university, but I've been an instructor of CPR for the Red Cross for 10 years. It's something that I taught and will come out as we play later on in the biochemistry of cannabis. So in talking about cannabis, a lot of people wonder what the difference is between hemp and what we call marijuana. The only difference really when we're talking about the two is the amount of THC involved in the plant. That's one cannabinoid in the plant. And it's the cannabinoid that's responsible for the psychoactivity or for getting you high. Okay? And the only difference between hemp and marijuana is that compound and how much of it is contained in the plant. So if it has 0.3% or less, we call it hemp. And that product is really durable fibers that are mostly used in plastics, automotive, textile industries to produce really durable material, okay? And later on, we'll see that this durable material was crucial to the settlement of the New World and America's foundation and all of that. But everything else, you know, is in the marijuana industry, just has to do with that the plant, when it's growing, has more THC than 0.3%. Okay, but we can see that 0.3% in that THC really matters because the estimated size of the market, this is in America, $500 million for hemp. 10 to 120 billion dollars on the THC side. So later in the slideshow, I say we haven't really legalized cannabis sativa. What we've commercialized is THC over by and large in the large industry. But as science develops, we're learning more and more and more about this. And while the difference is THC content, now we're learning about other cannabinoids and their content and how it can have an effect. We're learning about terpenes and how terpenes can have an effect. For example, one of the terpenes is called myrcene. And if the plant doesn't have any myrcene, or if you remove myrcene, then THC does not cross the blood-brain barrier. So it doesn't get into your brain. So now, as we're looking at pharmacological or like drug use applications of cannabis, you could remove this terpene and eliminate people's psychoactive effect. And then, of course, flavonoids. And terpenes and flavonoids, they really play on your smelling system, which influences taste when you get into the compound. But this man right here, Ernie Small, he's worked for Health Canada since the 60s. He's a dinosaur now in the industry. In 1971, Health Canada commissioned him to be the sole researcher on cannabis within Canada. And really where we've got most of our knowledge from is from Ernie's studies. And he's the one who made the 0.3% differential between hemp and THC, which unfolded in our laws, one going into the restricted substances, the other going into an agricultural ability with the industrial hemp regulations. But this 0.3% from Health Canada's research went around the world. And it's actually the global standard on what makes hemp different from cannabis sativa, even though both of them in the nomenclature, the naming of science, they're both the cannabis sativa plant, the same cannabis genus. Now, when we talk about cannabis, we kind of tend to talk about two. Some people talk about three of ruderalis, but I ignore that. If they're talking about a third, it's a hybrid among the two. So you have cannabis sativa and cannabis indica. And I think of them as Dayquil and NyQuil. So sativas are for your daytime relief when you're out and doing your work day and need to have, you know, some cerebral, some brain functioning going on. Whereas indica is more that like in the couch, you know, the kids say. It's the classic thing you think about, you know, you get hungry, you get sleepy, you get lazy or something like that. But again, remember, the difference between a drug and a poison is the dose. So how much you have of these is going to have a relative effect to you. Most of what we're used to in the black market is the indicas, the body stoned feeling. And the reason is the grow cycle time. If you look at that little chart there, grow flowering time, 6 to 8 weeks for the indica, 10 to 16 weeks for the sativa. In the black market, when you're not trying, you don't want to get caught growing, you don't want to get caught selling, you want this to happen as fast as possible. So they were forcing it down into the indica side of things and just gauging it based on what we knew, the THC compound, which affected the brain. So they pushed up that THC quality, and that led to these different, you know, ideas of what we have today. But this is the science that's out there. And I mean, even though Health Canada took up some of the research in the 70s, it was this gentleman in the 60s who really gave the worldwide reasoning to look into this on a very serious basis. But his inspiration actually came from the United States government, and I'll get into that in a little bit. But Meshulam, as a young Israeli scientist, graduated his medical degree in '61 and decided to do a PhD after that. And Meshulam investigated the cannabis plant. And Israel is a really fascinating place because they have to have mandatory military service there. So post-traumatic stress disorder is super high within their population context. And Meshulam has brought cannabinoid therapy to post-traumatic stress disorder since the 60s in that context. So really important man, known around the world as the godfather of THC because he discovered it in the 1960s, along with another substance that we really talk about today, cannabidiol, CBD, okay? This man is the reason that we understand that. Now, this is a diagram from Leafly. Okay, Leafly is an online cannabis magazine, one of the best sources of cannabis information in the world. Probably every dispensary you go into are basing a lot of their strain information off of Leafly resources. Sometimes people just print out Leafly stuff and stick it right on the counter there for you to see, because it is such a notable resource. Here they have the cannabinoids that we commonly talk about. Here you can see the CBD and THC. Some of the things they help with: hypertension, glaucoma, really specific ailments. But the center will kind of just give you a general high-level category. So pain and sleep, gastrointestinal disorder, mood behavior, neurological, and then some other. But this other is, as you can see, with more related to immunodeficiencies. Okay? So these are the things that cannabis is helping with. But remember I said, you know, everything that we know now, half of it will be wrong in 10 years. This is just the true evolution of science. So some people, you know, those are all the positive effects that we can have. What about some of the unwanted side effects? Every medicine out there, right? You see a depression magazine or ad from thing, it's going to help you, but it might cause you to poop yourself or something, right? They have serious side effects with those. Cannabis has side effects too, negative side effects, unwanted ones. Short-term memory problems. You know, you might use your cannabis, never find your keys. You're not going to find them till it wears off. But again, the difference between drug and poison is dose. So like these panic, these hallucinations, these loss of personal identity, things that can happen in a short, that really has to do a lot with how much you've taken, how much dose you've had, okay? Most of the time, if someone is experiencing these symptoms, you would say they've taken too much THC. So the solution to pollution is dilution. CBD and THC bind to the same receptors within your body. You can take more CBD to counteract some of these effects as your our fellows back there from Creative Choice were knocking their head. And then you have your long-term effects. So what's going to happen if you're using this daily over a long period of time, right, to treat some symptom that you have every day? Decline in IQ, they say, poor school performance. And earlier today we had Faye from the education department up here really talking about how cannabis can impact the youth, and a lot of this is the things that she's brought up. But, I mean, is the decline in IQ really up from the biochemistry of the cannabis and affecting you? Or is it because you're not going to school as much and learning and, you know, maybe outside using cannabis with your friends instead of going to class, poor school performance, chances of dropping out and stuff? Are these life factors or are these biological factors to do with the cannabis plant? I would say that they're more life factors to do with the cannabis plant, but nonetheless, these are some of the risks and side effects that we have. But again, is cannabis as safe as we think? This is an article that was published yesterday in the New Yorker, and I found it really well written and really good. If you wanted to look it up, this is an excellent, you can browse about 4 articles for free on their site before they try to get a buck out of you. But really, this talks again about that's what my professor taught me in first year. Do we know the science? And the American Medical Association last year did a big meta-analysis. So they looked at all the studies that are out there on cannabis globally and tried to come to some conclusions. So there are no good quality randomized trials investigating cannabis. We have evidence for marijuana as a treatment for pain, but very little is known about the efficacy, dose, routes of administration, or side effects commonly from the commercial cannabis products. The caveats continue. Is it good for epilepsy? Insufficient evidence. Tourette syndrome, limited evidence. ALS or Lou Gehrig's disease, Huntington, Parkinson, insufficient evidence. Irritable bowel syndrome, insufficient evidence. So it's really in this top phrase, there are no good quality randomized trials for science. And why is that? Well, in America, science is a Schedule I drug. Schedule I drug means it has no medical benefit. So it's very hard as a medical researcher to obtain the right ethics, review committee support, etc., that you need as an academic to study something, right? Second problem with this is, for the United States, talking specifically, all the cannabis comes from the University of Missouri, and they have 2 strains. 2 strains from 1 source. Is that really good product for us to be using for high scientific level testing? It's not. And a number of people have been trying to lobby the federal government to change that. And under Obama and the Democrats, it seemed like it was going to. They were going to open it up to 5 other universities in the United States. But Trump being, himself, that's all cut down and shut down right now. Right until him and his friends can figure out a way to capital on it. But what this is suggesting, and I agree with it, is our science is not well enough defined right now. And we need to work on it, evaluating it better. Here in Canada, positive research and funding through Health Canada for cannabis research only started in 2013. And that's because in Canada, we made cannabis illegal. We prohibited it in 1923. Same time, we had the Chinese Excise Act, that we were not allowing any more Chinese immigrants to come into Canada. And Emily Murphy published this story called The Black Candle. There was a number of small, short stories that were all fabricated fiction, but she was very well popular because of it, tapping into some hype that was going on at the time. The hype being that the Chinese people are bringing negative things into Canadian society. Mostly they targeted opium, but nonetheless, this writing and the Chinese riots that happened between the 1920 and 22, Prime Minister William Lyon Mackenzie King went out there, visited the people in Vancouver and surrounding area and asked, what's happening? Why did these riots really happen? And they blamed it on Chinese opium dens. So William had heard enough of what he needed to hear at that time, being a nice, white racist himself, and threw Opium and All Other Drugs Act together in 1923, which made cannabis a prohibited substance. But we found today that all of Emily's stories were made up. So unfortunately, they didn't have the blessed fortune of the internet back then to, fact check a lot of stuff. What did our neighbors to the south do? Well, they didn't do very much better. Johan Hari is a world famous journalist. He's worked for Vice, BBC, all sorts of big news, reputable sources. And he recently published a book in January of 2016 called Chasing the Scream. And it's essentially an autobiography on the war on drugs in America. But within that, he really talks about the early DEA executive director, CEO, whatever you want to call him, the boss there, the director of what was then known as the Federal Bureau of Narcotics, but today we call the DEA. And through the roaring 20s into the Depression, they lifted the prohibition on alcohol in the United States, and this gentleman needed something else for his department to stay alive. He was really good friends with a lot of cotton industry people who didn't want Chinese hemp impacting their market product, and he was a racist himself. And it's very well published through his journal entries that he's written, and people have them in that book. And he says that it was mostly just racism that fueled that and the need for Harry to keep his department alive. His uncle was the federal minister of agriculture at the same time. And again, there's all these cotton lobby interests and stuff that oppressed the Chinese hemp from the United States. But it's really interesting that they scheduled it in 1933 as a Schedule I drug, meaning it has no medical benefit. But in August 16th, 1940, the federal government of the United States filed a patent that said cannabidiol, CBD, was a neuroprotectant on the human body. And they own the patent on it, that they're the only ones allowed to give it out as a medicine. So it's a huge form of hypocrisy that on one hand, you would say this is a Schedule I drug that has no medical benefit, but by the way, if you want to use it as a medicine, we own the patent on this product. And this is documented history that still exists today. United States. So anyways, a lot of people started to discover from that time, and like I said, the patent from the United States fueled Meshulam as a young person to study this in his Israeli university. And in the 90s, he found out why cannabis works on the human body. And what he called it? The endocannabinoid system. Endo meaning within, cannabinoid, of course, being those molecules coming from the plant within the human or the Homo sapien body. And this system has been like casually termed relax, eat, sleep, forget, and protect. That's what they label it as in the medical community. And by the way, in North America, they recently did a study, only 11 universities across all of North America teach about the endocannabinoid system to their students. So even our doctors these days don't have this as a part of their curriculum, but hopefully it will be in the future. So how this works, I have a 2-minute video which I will show you on the endocannabinoid system. This is... Sorry, I think I'm getting the data from my phone, which makes it slower. Getting Marsha Trudeau's iPhone up here. Marsha, want to lend us some data? Yeah, the internet seems to be, oh, here's mine. I'll just hotspot myself, it's all good. Yeah, do you have that? Yeah, thank you. All right, information technology support. So then what do? Just click? Or... Okay, so while he's figuring this out with the endocannabinoid system, it's a really interesting thing. And the video talks that we've been using this product for a long time. For us to have receptors in our body, that means it took place with the process of evolution. How long does evolution take for something to get into our system? Usually for a genetic altercation like this, 10,000 years. Okay, so we've been using this for at least 10,000 years. Emperor Shen in China, the first Emperor Shen, 3500 BCE, okay, so like 5,500 years ago, wrote about this in the first pharmacopoeia, the first dictionary of Chinese medicine. He wrote about cannabis and its applications. And his time at that time was not to smoke it, but to dilute it into an oil and apply it to people's ailments. But nonetheless, we can see that through evolution, we've been with this plant a very serious long time in order for us to have receptors in our body. And it's essentially what it is. So your body has the locks all over the place, okay? And when you consume the cannabis, keys to those locks are coming into your body and opening up things, causing a physiological cascade, they call it, essentially a domino effect. And so when people talk about cannabis healing your cancer or something like that, it's not the cannabis that's healing your cancer. Your body is healing it. But the cannabis is opening up the right channels of balance within your biochemistry in order to make this happen. So, yeah, maybe should I just skip it? A little technical difficulties this evening. I feel stalled. Should we try the hotspot again, maybe? Oh, I got it. You got it? Sweet. All right, we got it. 1 minute. How else? Stitch, can we get some cartwheels up here? This afternoon, Stitch shared that he's been... Yeah, come up here and share your CBD story with us and how the endocannabinoid systems helped you while we have our technical difficulties sorted out for us. All right, so the man who needs no introduction in this room.
Ani, Andrew Mantowi, Dijnakash, I'm Stitch from the Lands Office in Wakomakong. I'm not representing the lands today, I'm just representing myself. It's a personal testimonial. I'm not at work today, I'm on annual leave, so in case anybody disputes me being here, I'm here on my own own accord. Anyways, for the last 3 or 4 years, I've been in great excruciating pain from working for the people, and I've had torn ligaments in both shoulders and sciatic nerves, gagicha bokon, gagicha gade, everything else, a broken heart, you know, you name it, I've had it. And I was getting, my hair was falling out. That's why I'm wearing this beautiful do-rag. Anyways, I was at a conference up the hill at the language conference, and one of the teachers had mentioned to me to take CBDs, and I said, oh, I don't know if I want to take marijuana. I said, he goes, no, Stitch, take it. He says, try it out. He says, you'll feel great. It has no THC in it. You're not going to get addicted. You're not going to overdose. Try it out. And I said, I don't know. Maybe I'll try it out. I'll see what goes on. And he came back next day. He gave me a bag full of liquid capsules. And he gave me a week's supply. And he says, try it out and see how it goes. So I took 3 of them right off the bat and started chewing them. Nothing, no problems. And next day I took another 3. After 4 days, I was getting out of bed and showering, and I noticed I could reach my back and everything else. I could, squat and bend over. I could sit down and take a dump and flush the toilet with both hands now, behind my back and everything else. And I was in no more pain, and it was unreal. No pain whatsoever, anywhere. All over my body, I could do everything, but I ended up being stupid one night. I ended up thinking I was Hercules, like Jake here. I was bringing in wood. And I'm not strong enough yet. You know how strong I used to be, eh? Tim knows, eh? And so anyways, I was bringing in wood, and I pulled a flipping muscle. And I said, oh, I'm not strong enough yet, so I got to realize I'm still old. But I'm not in pain. And I'm skating now, just going around. And I had some hockey players there, young guys like Cop over there, Brandon. And he tried to play a little move on me. I said, that's nothing. I said, I created that job. But CBDs, I've ordered it, 2 days, delivered right to the reserve. It's a medicinal hemp plant, sativa oil. It's a food supplement. And it's delivered right to my door. $40 a bottle for a month's supply. I've been giving it to my family, my mom. I have a niece that has MS. She still has MS, but she's pain-free. And I've been sharing it with people in the community. When I first started becoming pain-free, which is about 5 weeks now, I couldn't stop talking about it. And I'm a believer in it. And just like with maple syrup, I make maple syrup. I use the Ziza Bakarabo for myself, and I create it. And I'm going to grow this hemp. And I'm going to make it for myself because I want to be pain-free. I don't want to have to buy this no more. It's a natural medicine given to us by Jim Little, and I'm very, very grateful for it. And like I said, my back is just killing me. So here, as you've been waiting for.
Woo! He break dances for money.
I feel great. There's no doubt about it. And, I cannot tell you any more than what has happened to me. But this is just a testimony I told Jacob about. And Tim, I said, I gotta speak to you. I have some information there about this product here. You can order it online by Amazon. It's delivered to you. It's just information. It's good for me. I don't know how many different strains of hemp, how many different strains of CBDs there is, but I spoke to the gentlemen in the back, guys from Wanapate, another group that was here this afternoon, and if they're going to help us grow this, make it work, I'm going to do it. Be much.
Thanks, Stitch, for sharing your story and your cartwheel ability. We are truly blessed. Here is a quick science video. Oh, you better work on this now. Technical difficulties again. That will explain some of the stuff that's going on in Stitch's body to help why he's. What is going on?
That's a picture of me right there. The first.
Thought it was the second one there, the red one. Oh man, what's going on? This worked fine this afternoon. All right, I'm sorry. and if this isn't going to work, and I don't want to stick with it too much longer, there are great resources online that you can look up. This institute here is actually a Spanish institute. I don't know, I don't speak Spanish, so I don't know what that word means. But you can find this online. It's a 2-minute video. There's a lot of other ones. Again, it's just simply lock and key. Think about it as a lock and key. And cannabis is not curing you, your body's curing you, but cannabis is opening the right homeostatic, the right physiological channels for that to happen. Okay? So beyond its like therapeutical applications, what about its addiction risk when you're taking it as a medicine or taking it recreationally? Well, these numbers from 1999 are still as relevant and mostly the study that's used today. And here they are. So out of 100 people, okay, who decide in the same pool, these are what they're going to use, 9 of those 100 will become addicted to cannabis through exposure. 15% of the same 100 will be addicted to alcohol through exposure. Cocaine, 17 out of 100 through the exposure. The opiates, 23 of the 100. And the nicotine, 32. Okay, so out of all of the things that are kind of accessible by people right now, cannabis is the least addictive of all of it. And our good old world addiction leader, Dr. Gabor Mate, says that, you know, the root of addiction is pain. The root of this, the root of these addiction numbers is pain. And childhood pain, he says, most by and large. So, I mean, in First Nation community context, there's a lot of childhood pain over the years that's both inherited and experienced. 60s scoop, residential schools, all sorts of stuff has happened for childhood trauma to be prevalent. So that's why we have Thunderbird Partnership Foundation right now out there advocating cannabis use in community as a harm reduction approach. That's why we have certain doctors applying cannabinoid therapy to help people get off Suboxone, methadone, et cetera, because it's the least harmful of everything. Chief Ignace Gall, good buddy of mine out of Wapiskat there, says people in pain deserve a way out of pain. And that's what we're talking about when we're looking at this from a medical lens, really. And I think even when you're looking at it from a recreational or non-medicinal lens, it's still a self-medicating examination. But this slide here will help us to understand kind of what's the difference between those two industries. So on the medical side, when you're accessing cannabis products, how you do it is through a doctor's prescription. Okay, you need the doctor's prescription to get your medical cannabis. What the cannabinoid is that they're mostly focusing on, or the products that they're going to steer you towards, have this CBD, the CBD that Stitch was talking about. That cannabidiol is the one the government, the United States government, has the neuroprotectant patent on. It's really the medical focus right now, and it doesn't have any psychoactive or get you high effects. How people are using this, like Stitch showed his pills, it is orally or as a topical salve or something put on, as Brian showed. Doctors are not going to encourage people to smoke. Burning carbon, any carbon, whether that's red willow bark, whether that's sage, whether that's tobacco, whether that's cannabis, whether that's whatever, newspaper, that carbon combustion is very hard on your lungs. Okay, lungs were built to consume oxygen and that's it. So why would we put anything else in there? The target of relief is symptom relief. They're looking to relieve their symptoms. They're not looking to experience an escape from the world. They're just looking to treat pain that they have in some way. The rules that govern them under the Canadian law system is ACMPR, Access to Cannabis for Medical Purposes Regulations. I'll show you a bit about the history of those in the slides upcoming. And who are the people mostly talking about this? Well, it's doctors, it's academics, it's scientists, people in that sphere. When we come over to the recreational, what are we looking at? Well, how do you get the product? It's age of majority. So 19 years of age, 18 years of age, 21 years of age, depending where you are. What's the focus of the cannabinoid? It's the THC. It's that thing that's going to get you high, that's going to provide a psychoactive effect. That's what the recreational market's going after. How are they advertising people to get into it? Well, you have smoking through vaporizing, through dabbing, through joints, classic, you know, all sorts of different methods of smoking, and then sugary consumables. So you're seeing them in soda pop, candy bars, jelly beans, stuff like this, really attractive. Target is euphoria. You're just looking to feel good, right? Ease some social inhibitions. What's regulating that in Canada? It's called the Cannabis Act, or Bill C-45. And who's representing it? Usually it's celebrities, Snoop Dogg being a very famous one. So that's a little bit about how you can tell the difference is how people are prescribing it. The negatives that I've seen with this, again, it's like the THC is the focus. It has been the focus due to underground growing of this, trying to get the biggest, strongest effect for people. But that's why a lot of people are saying that we haven't legalized cannabis, really, we've commercialized THC. And that's what some of the people talk about, and I think that that has its drawbacks. One of the drawbacks is pharmaceutical patents. So this product, it's actually Durabolin, that O and L should be switched, are synthetic THC products that they're creating. But they've been causing a lot of anxiety, a lot of hyper activity within people because it's not used to being isolated like that. It's very similar to vitamin C. I don't know if you guys know this, but vitamin C pills do not work. And the reason is that you need everything else in the orange. Whatever else is coming with the orange or the broccoli, wherever you're getting that vitamin C. And in science, they call that the entourage effect. In a very academic term, just you need everything coming together for it to work well. Here, again, no good quality randomized studies. We don't have that in Canada. We don't have that in the US. We don't have that in any Western European nations because of our routes. We don't know the best way to take the dose. Most of our small intestine is lined with these receptors, but people are getting really good doses, taking it as a suppository as well. People are still consuming it orally, putting it on their skin. And then, of course, we still have crime and unhealthy product out there. A lot of, you have probably seen in the media, product recalls from licensed producers within the cannabis industry. They're finding illegal pesticides, mold, mildew, mites, all sorts of things that are on these plants that are not healthy for us to consume, whether you eat them or combust them or smoke them. Okay, so nonetheless, they're showing some positive things. This is the largest longitudinal study, long-term study on cannabis that's ever been done. And it was an 11-year study that was done across 50 of the states in the US. And it was between 1999 and 2010. And in summary, what they found was that states that have easier access to medical cannabis have a lower opiate mortality rate. So less people are dying from opiate overdose when there's easy access to cannabis, essentially is what's gone on with this United States study. So it was really interesting and kind of groundbreaking. So a licensed producer here in Canada, one of the first, Tilray, they're on Victoria Island in BC. They did their own study very similar to this, and they took 271 of their patients. These 271 patients were all on heavy prescriptions when they came into Tilray's care. Tilray found that 63% of these folks, so over 140 of them, have completely switched from the prescription to the cannabis therapy. Of that 63%, 30%, so about 70 of those people, were opiate related. So 70 people in that study switched completely from opiates to cannabis therapy and replaced it. That's a really good indication that this is working as well, but it's only one of a dozen studies. Here is more what a Canadian Focus and Maclean's, using anecdotal evidence, says, is legal weed an accidental solution to the opiate crisis? Because what they found in this article, which was written 2018, is that opiate mortality in Canada is down. And the only thing that's changed, no policy, has been the legalization of cannabis, nothing to do with opiate policy. Actually, opiate policy has gotten worse in favor of mortalities from opiates because Ottawa, in March of 2018, removed the legal exemptions for prescribing heroin and methadone, which means you no longer go on a special list, you no longer have to put a whole bunch of paperwork through for a patient to get on either of these substances through your handwriting script as a doctor. And this is really bad for First Nation communities. I work as the lead consultant on the cannabis file for Anishinaabe Nation and all the fly-in communities in Nan, and they have an opiate pandemic going on where over 90% of the communities in some cases are on either Suboxone or methadone. And the chiefs complain like people need to leave their office just for an hour to go to the doctors and get this drink. It's becoming a super strain on their salaries. You can imagine paying someone an hour to go do something every day. organizational sphere, it adds up to like $500,000 easy. So now it's easier to access these opiates in Canada. Thunderbird Partnership Foundation was formerly known as the National Native Addiction Partnership Foundation, funded by the federal government to draft all the curriculum, all the learning material for the NADAP workers, for the National Alcohol and Drug Abuse Program workers. They're headed by Carol Hopkins. Carol's Lenape from Moravian Town, Bucktown, just in southwestern Ontario. And they created a First Nation Community Cannabis Guide. They got $500,000 from Health Canada to produce this document. And it's not only education for the NADAP workers, but also there's something in this magazine for if you're a governance person, if you're on council, for educators, people who are in education to develop materials, and even if you're a citizen to help inform you to bring questions forward to your council. So it's a free document, Thunderbird PF, Partnership Foundation, thunderbirdpf.org. Okay, everyone can go and take a look at that and see what Health Canada invested in. But number one message from it is embrace cannabis as a harm reduction strategy. Harm reduction strategy just means it's better to have, people are going to use something. Of all the things that are available to them, cannabis is the least harmful, not only to their own body, but to the society around them. I've spoke with many different police officers, and no one has ever said they came to a domestic dispute where cannabis was involved. Usually it's always alcohol that is present there. So how do we get here? How do we get to this really fantastic conversation that we are having today? And what's going on with the legal framework in Canada? That's what we're going to jump into. So I mentioned cannabis became illegal in 1923 in Canada. What changed? Well, in 1997, a man from Toronto, his name was Terry Parker. Terry was found cultivating 400 cannabis plants. Terry was a terminal epileptic patient. He was having like 1,000 seizures a day. His life was brutal. He probably wasn't growing it himself because he couldn't really move. But either way, it was his property. He was on the property. He got arrested. He got charged. Had to go to the Ontario Superior Court. Had to appeal, had to go all that way. And they found that it was against his human rights within Canada, against the Charter of Rights and Freedoms, because it was the only way that he was experiencing relief. And so Terry was a very early case for us that one, cannabis is a medicine in Canada, two, that it's actually a human right as a medicine should you need it. So Terry's case took a couple years to get resolved. It was actually 1999 when they finally concluded it. And in 2000, the federal government the Supreme Court gave the federal government 1 year to enact a program, 1 year to make medical marijuana available to people who are in need. So in 2001, they came out with this, Medical Marijuana Access Regulations. And what that said was either if you're a person whose medical condition warrants cannabis, you can cultivate it for yourself, or you can get someone else to cultivate it for you, okay? So that had a lot of problems. One was they let people cultivate up to 1,000 plants a patient. Nobody needs 1,000 plants in a year. Right now, the Ontario government's framework, 4 plants a household, right? One person, 1,000. It's crazy. So what happened was a lot of organized crime actually picked up on this and grabbed these licenses and cultivated legally and sold illegally. They were just looking for anyone. If you were sick, maybe you didn't even want cannabis, but they wanted to use you for the license. So this happened. Health Canada realized they made a whole bunch of mistakes here, but they still didn't do much about it until this court ruling came forward. And this court ruling just basically said not everyone knows how to grow cannabis, or not everyone knows someone who can grow cannabis. So if you're a sick person who needs it, and you don't know how to cultivate it yourself, or don't know anyone to cultivate it for you, how do you get it? So they said that you need to start creating private retailers to cultivate under this. And that's when medical cannabis became privatized for the first time, and Tweed got built out of the Hershey factory in, just outside Ottawa. And now we have over 100 licensed producers here in Canada. But this was under Mr. Harper. And when Mr. Trudeau got elected, he said basically this agricultural approach to cultivation under the MMPR is not high enough quality product for Canadian consumers. And people were giving a lot of feedback negative about licensed producers' cannabis then, just as much as they're giving negative feedback about it now. What changed is he developed this access to cannabis for medical purposes regulations, and they're a pharmaceutical grade standard. So this was agricultural and fell under agricultural regulations, now pharmaceutical and falling under pharmaceutical regulations. Pharmaceutical regulations, they basically call them GMP or GPP, good product practices or good manufacturing practices, and these are essentially like clean rooms, really is the difference. Everyone's been to a farm. It's not exactly the cleanest place where you're going to eat off the barn floor, but if you've been to a licensed cannabis facility underneath this regulations, you certainly can. Clean rooms, and super amount of documentation of everything that happens in the facility is the difference. That happened in 2016 that he did that. That's fully received royal assent. That is the medical legislation that everyone follows in Canada today. The second thing that happened, and it was a rather exciting piece of his platform, was he's going to legalize non-medicinal use of cannabis or adult use of cannabis, and that's called Bill C-45. Okay? And that received royal assent in June, and October 17th we legalized cannabis all across Canada. None of this, though, happened in conversation with First Nation communities. It was all forced upon the federal government from the Supreme Court of Canada, and they rushed it through. And in their rushing through, they didn't consult with us. This year, the Ledane Commission, just as a quick side note, in 1969, Pierre Elliott Trudeau, his father, looked into cannabis as well. And what happened under the Ledane Commission, they were supposed to look at everything with cannabis and see what to do about it. Because then, was like everyone knows, the 60s with the hippie generation and stuff, lots of cannabis consuming in public. The flower children. So anyways, this was supposed to be a 5-year study, and they gave them money for 5 years. After 3 years, the committee stopped their work and said, we can't find a lot of negatives with this. It's not really worth enforcing. We recommend decriminalization of all cannabis possession in Canada. No one listened. No one listened to the report. Pierre Elliott didn't listen to it. No one did. It got put on the shelf until his son became Prime Minister, and they used it to come forward. So again, like we have 23, restricted substance in Canada, all the way to 1997 with Terry Parker here, epileptic Torontonian, getting us back here. So right here, all positive research on cannabis is banned. You can't get access to it as a researcher in Canada. So no one is looking into this. No one's helping us. That's what I'm saying. What we know right now is going to change, because now it's legal. Now we can research it. We're going to start to explore it. Here, 8,000 BC, okay, that's 10,200 years ago. Records of cannabis being consumed in archaeological findings around the world. I mentioned Emperor Shen, right here documented, 2700 BC, 1000 AD, documented use of hashish all across the Middle East, etc. And then now we're getting into the 1980s and beyond, and it's getting into very serious science, and I expect that to only continue into the future. I'm not going to go into this slide because it's really just for, sometimes there's lawyers in the room and they really like details and stuff. So that's for you guys watching on the screen from your legal office. I want to talk about home grow for a second, because under the Health Canada regimen, you're allowed to grow cannabis right now at your residence. Every single person here who has a residential address can cultivate until Waquemacong Band Council says no, because Health Canada's rules and Canada's rules are applying until we have other rules in place. So you can grow 4. That's per residence. So me and this gentleman live together. We're students. We're studying somewhere. We have a residence together. He can't grow 4 plants, and I can grow 4 plants. No, it's only 4 for that household. So we're going to have to do 2 each or something like this, right? Figure it out. If you're a landlord, you own 5 properties. You think, I'm going to have 20 plants growing, 4 at each location. You can't do that. It's only 1 primary residence that you can use for this cultivation. But where it can get confusing, especially for law enforcement, is with the medical. So Health Canada allows you to have 5 times as many plants as your daily gram allowance. So when you get a prescription from your doctor, it'll say 2 grams a day. It won't say 1 in the morning, 1 at night. It won't tell you how to take it. You got to figure that out on your own, all at once, whatever. you know, you can grow 5 times the amount of plants that you have. So in this example here, they say a patient who is prescribed 5 grams of cannabis per day can grow up to 25 plants. 25 plants, okay? So it's a lot more if they have the medical card. Further, they can carry a lot more in public. Your medical prescription is the same thing. You can carry a 3-month supply at one time. So 90 times 5, 450 grams. 450 grams a patient who's prescribed 5 grams of cannabis a day can carry. But if you're just a regular citizen, you're only allowed to carry 30 grams. So having medical has certain advantages in carrying more cannabis, cultivating more cannabis, plus you can use different forms of cannabis. So cannabis oil is sold to medical patients, and they can produce whatever edibles they want, but for non-medicinal use, that is not available. Not available at all, but you can make them at home yourself. And this just details that a bit more, but if you look at this here, this is the fertigation chamber, an active fertigation chamber inside a Health Canada LP, inside our LP, Delshin actually. And lots of your council came through and toured that building, but this is in full operation. Look at how clean the floors, look at how clean everything is. Like it's absolutely nuts. We have to wipe everything with acetic acid basically every day, which isn't that harmful of a substance, so it's all right. Here, our lovely Justice Minister Raybould, who has now moved on to, I guess, Veterans Affairs now, worked on this file heavily, of course, at the start for Trudeau, developing Bill C-45. ACMPR rules were already basically done and in place. But their number one thing behind this, and they talk about it all the time, is public safety. Public safety, public safety, public safety. And that's where they developed a really rigorous testing regime. So Health Canada's testing program is absolutely crazy. It tests for 11 cannabinoids, 20 terpenes and flavonoids, and over 108 pesticides. When I started working in the cannabis industry, there was 9 illegal pesticides. Now there's 22. I imagine that list is just going to keep growing and growing and growing, and that's all in the name of public safety. It's hard to grow cannabis. Cannabis is not just a simple weed as you would think it is, throw some seeds in the ground and, you know, in 10 weeks go and pick it. No, bugs love it. They'll be all over it. Mold, mildew, loves it. Deer, other herbivores, love it, will come and eat it. Birds, all kinds of creatures. So people spray stuff onto it to keep those pests off, but that stuff's not good for us to consume. Someone from the health, education, Faye was here earlier, mentioned one of the pesticides that we used to use when you combust it, when you light it on fire, turns into hydrogen cyanide, very poisonous gas to inhale. We don't know what's happening with all the gray market stuff, and that's why they really say that they pushed it into the legal sphere is public safety, protecting all of us, because black market product was covered in pesticides. Some people talk about it being laced with fentanyl and all that. I don't think so, because that's a pretty expensive drug to mix in there, but the pesticides, so they're cheap. Those are what you got to watch out for. Now, every province has written its own rules because that's what the federal government devolved the power to. Again, not considering any First Nation community input or opportunity. And everyone's regulating it through the same kind of system. This is the Alberta Gaming Lottery Commission. Here, our Ontario Cannabis Store is, you know, fully operated by people from the LCBO formerly. So it's all about a government control for them. So is the message really public safety? I'm not sure. I think it's more control. Nonetheless, everyone's got different rules to follow. So if you're traveling around Canada, you go to different provinces, you have to look at what the cannabis policies are within that province. But we're going to focus on Ontario here for right now. June 19th is when this received royal assent, the Bill C-45. And right now, there is no legitimate testing mechanisms for roadside impairment. They have a couple machines, but these machines have proven faulty in cold weather conditions. And what really concerns me about this is that if the device is not working, then it befalls the officer's best judgment. I know, like, officer's best judgment has to do with what color your skin is. Myself, like, Mississauga man from Curve Lake, but I can walk through like a European, nobody's belief. My business partner, John, his father's Portuguese, very dark skin, he cannot. And we've experienced it together in cannabis places, consuming. He gets in shit, I don't. And so it's very troublesome for me what's going on. So to keep yourself out of trouble with the law, stick with what's legal, stay away from what's illegal. So what's legal? Well, for recreational, you can buy fresh or dry cannabis from a federally licensed producer. You can possess 30 grams of that in public or its equivalent. You can share that 30 grams with any adult that you feel like. And you can cultivate 4 plants per primary residence. And you can alter that cannabis at home for your own use. So if you want to take the flower home, cook it in butter, make cookies with that butter, then you can do that. And you can share that with your friends, but not for sale. Can't do that for money. So, a lot of stuff right now that we see in, the Toronto downtown dispensaries is edible, not really legal to be walking around the Canadian streets with, especially if it's in really formal packaging, right? If you have something that's really nicely packaged, it's going to be hard to explain that you made that at home yourself and then went through the trouble of packaging it. So it's illegal if you're under 18 years old, right? It's illegal to give this to minors in any way. It's illegal to put it in a vending machine and sell it. It's illegal to move it across international borders. Can't go into the United States. Can't, Las Vegas is a legal state. You can't fly down there with your cannabis because it's like $25 a gram in Vegas. It's crazy. You can't advertise really at all your product, and you especially can't use the marijuana leaf. That's a huge fine. You're not allowed to promote through sponsorships, endorsements. So actually, like Cody Crowley, they mentioned earlier, my good buddy from Peterborough, advertising with them and helping them. That can, if people want to mess with him, impact his boxing career for being, he's a professional boxer. Purchasing from an unauthorized retailer. If you look at Ontario's laws, if you are in an illegal dispensary when it's raided, if the police choose to grab you and pull you in, they can for trying to purchase illegal cannabis. You're probably not going to get away with, I was just in there learning and looking around. It's a $50,000 fine. It's no small thing. $50,000 up to. So the court has the ability to charge you from $0 to $50,000 if you get arrested in one of these stores. Got to be really careful. Home grow, again, you can do the 4 plants yourself or purchase in Ontario through the Ontario Cannabis Store. Right now, it's only online. Ontario Cannabis Store is 100% online. April 1st, they're going to have 25 stores open up. I don't know if Sudbury or North Bay got one. Did you see? I don't think they did. Yeah, Northern Ontario, I was hearing, got really screwed out of the deal. 2. So you guys are going to have a really hard time sourcing good product, other than what they're trying to do is force you to go online. But this store has had product shortages like crazy, product recalls like crazy, and crazy tax on it that goes to the provinces. 75% of the taxes go to the province, 25% go to the federal government. More look inside the fertigation chamber. You can see how clear it is. This is our facility. Yeah, that picture's terrible, but it's on a 10-acre estate. Some of these slides are jumbled, I apologize. First Nation cannabis movement. So what's been happening in First Nation community contexts across Canada? As far as like a national effort or something, that affects everyone goes, the only thing I've seen of someone working for everyone is Manny Jules. And a tax commission to me is not really much, but the First Nation Tax Commission is arguing with the federal government and lobbying them that similar to how we get our Ontario lottery gaming monies, just a percentage of the total revenues, that they do the same thing for First Nation communities across Canada. Give the communities a portion of that revenue split. So 75 to the province, 25 to the feds. They're arguing, 25% going to First Nation communities in that province, divvied out equally among the provinces. Then we can use that money for further economic development. But having a percentage of what they're doing is nothing compared to what it is of actually owning it for yourself. So I'll get further into this. The only LP right now, the only one who's doing legal cannabis under Health Canada's eyes in Canada is in Akwesasne. It's a place called Seven Leaf Development. And here is a picture of a dispensary in Tobic. Tobic First Nation is in northern New Brunswick, northwest New Brunswick. I've been working with them for 4 years now in the cannabis industry, and they have a pain management clinic. Tribal Relief, it's called. And that's how they get around right now selling cannabis is if you come in and identify as a pain, back pain, any pain that's not really easily verifiable. And they had an RCMP raid on their dispensary. And their community is really interesting. It only has one road in and out. And it goes way down a big hill into a peninsula. And I guess the RCMP went to shut this building down, and the community blockaded the road in and out. And they wouldn't let the RCMP leave. So the chief of the RCMP police for the Atlantic region called Chief Ross, the current chief there, and Chief Ross is the same age as me, he's a young 30s. He said, no, like if leave the product on the shelf and your men can walk through, or they don't leave. And they left the product, walked out, and have never bothered them again since. Most communities who operate this, and they challenge it, they're using Section 35 of the 1985 Constitution, which permits Indigenous people to use traditional medicines for whatever they want. Some other people use the United Nations Declaration Rights of Independence. Some people use their own Chinaknagewan, their own constitution to empower it. There's different ways to approach it, but none of this has a precedence in court yet. No one's lost, no one's won. These are all just still ongoing things. But this case was used successfully in, you remember in Six Nations a couple of years ago, there was a young girl dying of leukemia, and her family wanted her to go on traditional medicines because the, whatever, radiation, chemotherapy and stuff was really taking a toll on her. And in a Brantford court, they won using this Section 35 of 1985 Constitution. So other people are using it. Again, Canadian courts aren't pushing it. We can see in Saskatchewan right now, there's a really famous case going on, the Muscatine Band, 20 minutes north of Regina. They opened a dispensary on October 17th. The Saskatchewan Liquor Gaming Authority wrote them and said, close your doors. And the Federation of Sovereign Indigenous Nations, headed by Bobby Cameron, their Saskatchewan AFN representative, wrote the government a letter and said, this is their right to operate this store. Back off, or all of us, all 50-odd communities in Saskatchewan under that FSIN, are going to prosecute against you. We all support that nation. And that they'd be able to keep their doors open. Here in Ontario, Six Nations has their own rules going. And if you look at the Haudenosaunee people all the way from Lake Ontario up the St. Lawrence River, they all have their own regulations and they're being left alone. Akwesasne, Tyendinaga, Ganawage, Ganasatake, once we're getting into Quebec, all the way out to Listagouche, which is right at the end of the St. Lawrence River there. They all have their own regulations or being left alone selling cannabis. They're all different. Some of them the government owns, some of them is a permit system empowering membership. It's happening here as well. So the opportunity presents itself for Wakamekong to do the very same thing. But like you're going to want to look at some various things if you do that. Which is what Ontario looked at, what the federal government looked at, what every government who has the responsibility of public safety on their plate looks at, which is age of use, place of use. You know, remember the Wynne government said you could only use it in your private property. Now, Mr. Ford says smoke it anywhere tobacco is consumed. Purchase limits, I mentioned, you know, in Ontario you can only purchase 30 grams at a single time. Is that something that you want to do, less or more? The source of the product, where is it coming from? The variety of products, you know, is there going to be edible things there? Is it just flour? What are the type of things that are being offered? How are you going to pass your laws? Is it going to be a bylaw process or a referendum? Referendum being having everyone involved, bylaw usually just being 50% of whoever shows up to the meeting. Or lastly, you could banish it. You could not have cannabis here at all. And some communities have taken that approach. The Ontario government, with their powers bestowed by the federal crown, have set out a couple of letters to communities working with them. On the far side is the 2017 notice to communities, the one slide that we get in their 45 slideshow conversation. And here's the 2018 one. I'll put the 2019 up when and if they do one. They basically say the same thing. In 2017, you had to write a letter to the Minister of Finance. Now in 2018, it's Ministry Attorney General, whatever. What they say is you have two options. One, you write a letter to that minister and say, prohibit all cannabis, no cannabis, done. Well, Quemacong has done that. So if you are a resident here and you go to order cannabis from the OCS, what should happen is they refund your money and they don't send you anything because it's prohibited from delivery here. The other alternative is you write them and say, we want our own store, and then they'll work with you on that. But there's a whole bunch of stuff they don't talk about in that. One is the geographical distribution of it. So if you're a community in close proximity to others, whoever gets that Ontario store first, the others won't get it because they only want one in certain areas. Two is the size of your band. Usually they're only looking to give retail stores to communities who have over 2,000 people. And there's a whole bunch of other stuff they don't say. I'm working right now with a couple different communities who have sent letters in, and they're offering the communities different things. Some communities, they want to collect the taxes for them. Some communities have been able to get out of that. They're not offering the same program to everyone. It's an unfair balance between who can afford good legal negotiators to talk with the province when they schedule that. It's really unfair. In Saskatchewan, what they did there with their retail program, they didn't consult with First Nations either. They picked the 4 highest population reserves, gave them retail licenses, and then did a lottery system for the rest of the mainstream population out there. People are really upset with that, of course, right? But Saskatchewan News on Tax, and I find it kind of important because basically it says if you follow the Canadian system, then you can have a tax-exempt product, but it has to be cultivated on First Nation land and sold on First Nation land. So for these folks out in Saskatchewan, like I mentioned, the only legal dispensary, right, or cultivator, sorry, on First Nation land is in Akwesasne. They would have to all get their product from Akwesasne and sell only that product in order to be a part of the federal tax exemption. There is a cost competitive benefit to that. Total with the taxes on it, the excise tax and the GST, HST in Ontario, 1017, or Saskatchewan, sorry. 1017, the pre-duty price, $8. So if we were in the legal system and followed everything their rules, $8 versus $2.17 price per gram. One of the things that sucks about the federal government and provincial government's programs is there's no volume discounts. Anyone who's bought cannabis before from their local dealer knows that if you buy an ounce, it's way cheaper than just the per gram price is cheaper, right, than the individual gram price. They don't allow that. It's all 1 gram price. So with this 1017, you know, to get 3 grams of it is $30. $24 with the taxes off. Now, for communities who are looking to write their own rules, I recommend this CAMH report, Center for Addiction and Mental Health. They were commissioned by the Liberal government, the Wynne government, to do this work. And the Wynne government copied everything they said. And then Mr. Ford is crazy and has done something a little bit different. But what they said was and I think this model works really well for First Nation communities. Establish a government monopoly on sale. Okay, so the government controls all aspects to it. Set a minimum age. The government sets the minimum age. In Akwesasne, they wrote their own rules. The age they picked was 18. In Ontario, the legal age is 19. So they went a little bit lower, but they stayed within the federal provisions. Listigouche is 21. In New Brunswick, got to be 21 to buy cannabis out there. So set your minimum age up to whatever you think is right here. You got to limit availability. They don't think that it's wise to have 24-hour stores available for people to purchase cannabis at all times, but just to certain restricted hours, like alcohol. Curb the demand through pricing. So that what they're reflecting is that the government and the sales should be cheaper than the black market at first. Curb being like this, hockey stick. So at the start, they're sacrificing some profit in order to cut out the black market. It's what they recommended. It's not happening, but it's what they recommended. Curtail higher risk products. So that's why right now in the recreational, you cannot buy edibles, you cannot buy concentrates, because they're higher risk products. With edibles, it takes 45 minutes to an hour and a half for the effect to start hitting you. It'll last 4 to 8 hours. If you smoke it, you'll have the full effect in 20 minutes. It'll last 2 or 3 hours. So edibles are a higher risk product because you eat it, necessarily don't feel it, you eat more, you eat more, you eat more. Next thing you know, the difference between a drug and a poison is the dose. You've overdosed yourself. You're having a real bunch of negative side effects, panic, hallucinations, things like this that you didn't originally want. So curtailing high risk product, investing in education and prevention. So you got to explain to people why this is, why that's the way it is, what these different products do, which is why I really like, you know, having a dispensary model, because the bud tenders or the sale agent, you know, is able to converse with you on what product might be best and provide that education. Whereas when you're ordering it from the Ontario Cannabis Store, you have to rely on yourself to read it. I don't read very much of ingredient labels when I buy things. I buy it, I eat it. Most people are the same, right? Who counts calories? So prohibit marketing, advertising, and sponsorship. That's another thing that is still illegal in the Ontario framework, but you know, they don't want to see Michael Phelps or whatever, some big athlete coming and saying, this is the product for me, right? Because then everyone who thinks of that person as a role model, which is essentially how Milk drove their strategy, right? Got Milk using all the celebrities. Can't do that with cannabis. And milk's bad for you too, in case you didn't know. So, product information has to be displayed clearly. This has to do with their rigorous testing components. So, how it did with its pesticides, with terpenes, flavonoids, cannabinoids, are all within inside this. So you can, you know for yourself what you've got. Addressing impaired driving. If you've looked at all the retail framework business plan portions of any of the province's programs, they want to know in your business plan how you're achieving public safety, what your business is doing for that. And with the recent retail framework, they didn't do it like Manitoba and other provinces and gave you the scorecard you'd be scored on. That's something they've kept secret within their judging units. But that's something that's super necessary in your business plan. How do you address and help curb impaired driving on cannabis? Last is expanding treatment options and enhance access. So with this, what they're talking about was, if someone's on cannabis as a therapy, it should be used in conjunction with other therapies. So you have post-traumatic stress disorder, you're seeing a therapist for some sort of, you know, cognitive behavioral therapy, some sort of talk therapy, in addition to using the cannabis to get a better sleep, et cetera, et cetera. But it's not just cannabis alone, right? You've got to put other work in. This video here is probably going to come to the same problem of the last video, so we won't watch it, but essentially just 6 minutes into this video, it's a 20-minute video on YouTube, very old. I think it was produced in the 70s. It's still black and white footage all through it. But it has an anthropologist who talked about some of the early discoveries of Aztec civilization. Aztec being present-day Mexico, indigenous people of there. And he said that they were using hemp and cannabis in all sorts of ways. They were mixing the cannabis with tobacco and smoking it in pipes to induce naps, to help reach higher spiritual connectivity, but using the hemp fibers for rope, for sails, for all sorts of things like that. And then the Americans started learning about that from them, or the Dutch, the Spanish, all those colonizers, whatever you want to call them, the Europeans. They learned about it so much that when they took over the New World, all their settlers that they brought over legally had to cultivate hemp. You could pay your taxes in hemp. It was so important to the empire for all of its durable textiles, clothing, rope, sails, bags, everything, that the Declaration of Independence was written on hemp paper. This right here is cannabis sativa being farmed on the $10 bill, okay? That's how much it was super important, and they learned that from people who are indigenous to Mexico, meaning that it was here at contact, and here for quite a while. So, I mean, in summary, cannabis is here to stay. It's achieved royal assent in Canada. Whether we like it or not, it's here. There's an opportunity for us to get involved in it, but the time is really now where you've got to motivate getting the proper things in place. Otherwise, we could have a wild, wild west of it like we did with tobacco shops springing up everywhere, and not having the wealth in a coordinated way that benefits all. So I put John's contact up here if you want to reach out to a fellow Wiki band member, Jonathan at Pontiac Group. I'm available right now for questions for anyone who has them. We have a lot of vendors here who have some really key information. You guys were exploring with them earlier. Everyone's really friendly and nice. Please engage with them more. Any questions? Chuck. The potential for economic opportunity, so it all depends on how much you're selling. There's a documented article out there in CBC News on Legacy 420 in Tyendinaga, and they're reporting $20 million a year in income at an expense of $3.65 million in operating costs. So they're making $16 million a year off that dispensary, an individual. That's a high population area, but that gives you some figures on what can be done with a dispensary. Our licensed producer in the Health Canada model, we produced 3,000 kilograms a year, and that facility is making $30.4 million a year with a net profit of 17. So, you know, there's good money in either case. Really, really good money. Yep.
It's not a question, but I know you brought up Seven Leaf
Yep.
earlier.
Yep. Just to the mic, please.
Okay, so I know when I went to Calgary in November, Seven Leaf was actually presenting there as they are the first Aboriginal licensed producer of cannabis. However, that process, they started back in 2014. So it was a very lengthy process. So if we have community members who are interested in moving towards that direction, keep in mind the process, the timing, because they started in 2014. They said they had to go through really strict community measures to be a licensed producer on in an Aboriginal, I guess, community or First Nations. So just to keep that in the back of your minds too, that the timing was quite lengthy for them. So.
Yeah, the timing was quite lengthy, and they spent $27 million on the facility, so also very costly.
What about any other First Nations?
Well, what are they doing? Not sure I understand
The one from
the Mohawk, the Akwesasne? Yeah, so what's going on there? I mean, they have a licensed producer in their in their territory on the Ontario side. Their communities in Quebec, New York State, and Ontario. It's on the Ontario side. But then they've also written their own rules and established a permitting system. How they wrote their rules, they went through 3 community engagement sessions. They wrote a policy framework, put it out to community, hosted an event, had people come, yell at them, get constructive feedback, as we call it, right? Went back, rewrote the rules, came back to community, went back, rewrote the rules 3 times, and then did one final review with their council. Took them about 3.5 months. Not a crazy amount of time, really. And now that permitting system exists for retail sales. So members pay a $600 a year fee to the band administration for a permit. The permit says you follow these rules. The rules are basically you can't sell to anyone 18 years of age and under. And if you're transporting it among the territory, these are the following approved routes. So you can't just be transporting it any way you want. And if you're going to be going between the St. Regis side, the New York side, and the Ontario side, it's only by water and one approved waterway path. And they've worked with both federal agencies on each side of the border to achieve that. A very difficult structure, but they nonetheless put the work in and have that done. Yes, sir.
Is there, like, where is the financing coming from? Are there banks or other institutions that are willing to partner with First Nations in terms of launching these kind of projects?
So, short answer is no. The banks are not willing to really work on this, especially if you're not going down the Health Canada pathway. To cultivate a sovereign dispensary, there's no money out there that I know of other than, you know, entrepreneurs who have money. Tobacco people, you know, generally have the money, but entrepreneurs who have made it in other ways, that's generally where the financing comes from. Even in the mainstream, it's very hard to find monies for cannabis development. That's what sprung up some companies like Oxley, Cannabis Wheaton, who all they do is provide financing to people who are looking to get into the industry, and then they take a portion of the ownership in your building, as well as a portion of your supply as a payback stream. So the finding of capital has been the major issue with this, and is why we're seeing, you know, mostly the wealthy get wealthier through the industry, and big cannabis activists like Mark Emery are complaining against that because it's not equal opportunity for all.
Speaking on that again, I guess. I'm not sure if you know anybody who have utilized their financial administration law in terms of taking a risk to invest in themselves in this kind of capacity. Are you aware of anything like that?
Yeah, so the First Nation, the financial administration law is for communities who are registered with the First Nation Financial Management Board and the sister organization First Nation Finance Authority. I do know a lot of communities who have used that money to develop cannabis facilities. I probably shouldn't name any just due to confidentiality things, but yes, the Finance Authority lends to projects that are in the legal Health Canada regime.
What kind of protection do communities have so that criminal investors don't assist people who are interested in?
What type of support is there for communities to make sure that criminal protections, to make sure that criminal money is not being infiltrated into the sector? Well, nothing formal, nothing formal. You have your own due diligence processes as a community, your people who conduct that, who have to be able to smell when something's rotten. But otherwise, there are, of course, examples of communities that have illegal product coming from organized crime entities being sold under the blanket of sovereignty. That happens. That happens in tobacco. That happens in gaming. Unfortunately, that's just organized crime is smart.
And trafficking of humans.
Well, then the trafficking of humans, yes. So that's the problem with it, really, is that the proceeds of crime go to fund other crime, and human trafficking is a huge element which we all should be certainly against.
Hi. Hi, Jacob. Okay, I don't know. This question isn't mainly for you. It's more or less for, let's say, chief and council that are here, or council that's here, and also the WDC board. It's in regards to the Wikwemekong business policy and procedure. That's something that I think definitely we should review in regards to if you do decide, or our community does want to go ahead with like dispensaries or any grow operations, and also applying it to our Naknagewin and our Chinaknagewin, to actually review this as well. In again, some communities, you said, you know, have a policy, and we do have a business permit policy here in our community. So I think that's really important, so that we can inform our community members what that is as well. So I just wanted to make a comment and have you guys maybe possibly look at that and reviewing it this year. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, we reached a quiet point, so we'll open it up at 7:15. You know, interact with the vendors. They've kindly been here, extended themselves pretty late. Yep, one more question. All right.
Ani, my question is to Timmy and some of the councillors that are here. I don't really know what's the purpose of this meeting. Information meeting about cannabis. And is it for the chief and council to decide if they're gonna take this Minao? Or is it for individual people too?
So, okay, sure. I'll just briefly say that this is to, from my perspective and understanding, is to raise awareness and information about cannabis, as it's a lot of misinformation out there. There's going to be a survey that follows, gauging community interest in all, whether, you know, it'll be a band-owned entity or member fostered entity, or multiple entities, or a permit system. There'll be a survey comes out, and then there'll be a series of council workshops, further understanding council's understandings of, you know, fiduciary responsibilities, legal opportunities, and where the strategies are best. So this is more to raise awareness and understanding and knowledge base within membership, to have a better informed survey respondents, and then to use that survey in conjunction with other consultants to come up with an opinion.
And you mentioned a referendum.
Yep.
Is that what you
So I don't know, a referendum or a bylaw procedure vote are just some of the strategies communities take. So I was just saying that that's something to think about, and it's a question on the survey that comes out as well. And that's just how serious is the decision going to be taken?
Well, this is a major thing, then that's why I'm asking that, because that's what they used to do, our leadership, the old leadership that used to be here.
Do you want to comment?
Yeah, me coach Marion. No, like today's purpose was information. That's why we brought Jonathan in, or Jacob, sorry, and the Alderville group, just to share their experiences of what they have done to get where they are at now. We are taking this very slow. We're not even starting a framework, nothing yet. This whole purpose of this was just to give our community members information, education about the CBDs, the benefits of it, the negative impacts of recreational marijuana, all of that. This was all an education piece. And to come out of this is exactly what Jacob said, is a survey. It's to get direction from our community members on what yous want to see to move forward. It's not up to us to say, okay, yeah, okay, next week we're going to start a framework agreement, develop a law. It's going to be up to yous what yous want to do. And for us to review that information through the surveys, and us as council to come up with an executive decision to move forward on this. So that's what this is all about. It's all to give information to all of yous about marijuana and cannabinoids, cannabis, for us to have a proper way up to move forth on this. And if we are, it's going to be up to you if you want it to be community run, an individual who wants to do entrepreneurship. But again, exactly what Janine said also, we have to look at the business permitting process also. So our economic development right now is working with a consulting group, just starting to look at that, how it's going to work and how it's going to look for a community, just in case community does want to go in that direction. Because right now, we're not going in the direction until we hear from yous, what yous want to do. Yeah?
You want to wrap it up?
You got the mic. You got the mic. One of our local police officers here. Come over.
I'm just. I was just wondering if there was any aspect that was presented as far as I know there was some mention as to the legal aspect. I know I was just told last night that I was coming here. Had I known a little bit more, like maybe would have got something together. But just what I wanted to stress is the laws have all changed. This has affected all the laws, drinking and driving especially. There's been a lot of changes to the alcohol side of it as well because of the Cannabis Act. If you want to look at it, the fines for cannabis are horrendous. Like seriously, you get caught smoking a joint in your car, $700. You get caught with an open beer, it's like, I was just trying to look it up, it's like $100. So you see the difference? You're fishing on the riverbank, or the lake side here, back home be the riverbank. You have an open beer, one can of beer, having a sip fishing. You can be charged with numerous offenses depending on your level of intoxication. Your buddy beside you can be standing there smoking a marijuana cigarette and nothing. No ticket, no nothing. So just on that side of it, the recreational side, you got to be careful. The packaging as well, if you're caught without the certain packaging, fines are crazy, like do your research. We're still trying to do ours. We haven't been given a lot of direction on the law enforcement side of it, so just keep that in mind. So we're still learning as well, and in the beginning stages, there is going to be a lot of leeway. Some enforcement agencies are going to be a lot different. I'm not sure what the OPP's been directed to. So just keep that in mind. You're driving, you have it in your vehicle. Even if they see it in your vehicle, there's enforcement for that. So keep that in mind. I'm not saying everybody in here smokes it, but that's just even if there's a passenger in your vehicle, you as the driver or the owner of the vehicle are responsible for that. And that not only affects you as having to pay those fines, it affects your insurance. Your insurance has access to all this information. You know, so keep that in mind. And I know how much I pay for insurance as a police officer with no fines or nothing. So imagine tacking all these fines and your insurance has that access to that. As far as a community standpoint, there's not a lot I could say, other than since I've been here in Wiki for 14 years now, coming up 14 years this August. And in my involvement here as a police officer, marijuana has been prevalent that whole time. I'll tell you that there's also been other stuff with it. It's never just marijuana. So that's something that you have to consider. I think in the beginning stages of this recreational use, I'm not saying marijuana is bad. It's just there is things that you have to consider. Young users, I know there's studies galore out there that anybody under 25 that uses, because your brain's not fully developed, it affects the chemicals in your brain. Do your research. It's all out there. There's no excuse. Everybody has a computer in their hand now. It's right here. Right? There's no excuse. Everybody has an iPod. Everybody has some type of electronics that links up to something. Do your research. I'm not sure what else was mentioned. I missed today, but I just wanted to make that clear. Especially on the impaired side, I know there was mentioned, depending on, you mentioned something about the color you are. I don't know how true that is. But as far as, there is a process now that that they are doing to detect impaired drivers by cannabis or marijuana use. It's a lengthy process. It's not as simple as, here, blow into this. But keeping that in mind, now because of cannabis, we can pull you over at any time and issue that demand for you to blow your breath into a roadside screening device. Before, we used to have a reason to do it. Now, we see you driving, we can ask you. And I think that's a good law. We shouldn't have people out there drinking and driving. But again, I'm not every officer. Other officers are going to be doing different things with it, and it's going to be affected that way. As far as cannabis, I know they were trying to make, it was like a lick stick. You lick it. Problem is, now we have your DNA. The only way to effectively get the count is through blood right now. So what happens is a lengthy process you go through. You do roadside tests. You actually have to blow into a breathalyzer to show that you don't have alcohol on board, but you're still showing signs of impairment. And then we take you to the hospital and get a sample of blood. And if you refuse, you're charged anyway with refusal at any step of the way. Well, diabetes is different, right? There's different symptoms. And as soon as we get to the hospital, somebody there is going to tell us you're diabetic, right? We can get that information. And I have a family of diabetes, background of diabetes, so I'm aware of that. I've actually had one incident here in Wiki. He wasn't driving, where it came in as an intoxicated person, and ended up being his blood sugar was extremely low. And that was, in all my years as a cop, almost 20 years, that was the first time. So, it doesn't come up very often. That was just some of the things I wanted to mention. I'm not sure.
Yeah, Constable McComb. Well, like with the legal aspect, of course, we're going to be there, again, supporting our local law enforcement to enforce those laws in our community. Just because it is legal doesn't mean everybody, it's a free-for-all to go and smoke marijuana on the street, to drive intoxicated or under the influence of marijuana. They're still under the rules and regulations of provincial, federal laws to enforce that in our community. And us as leadership here, that's where we have to, if it does get approved by our community, create those rules and regulations, the cannabis law, where it states all of that in there. And again, it allows our local law enforcement to continue to enforce those laws that are put in place once it became legal. So again, we're supporting our law enforcement to continue to keep our community safe. By doing this process, if we do go in this direction, it's going to be more controlled, under more rules and regulations, even though the federal, provincial laws say that you could grow this in your home. That is untrue here in our community, because anybody living in rental property management, there is a policy in place where you cannot grow that in that dwelling. If you have your own personal home, sure, you may be able to do it, But us as leadership said, no, we're not allowing that. And we're going to take our time on this before we move forth. That's why everybody was asking, how come you're not allowing us to do this? It's legal on this day. How come we can't order it? It's because we want to ensure we are taking all the proper steps to move forth on this and looking at all the safety aspects of our youth so it doesn't go into the hands of anybody else and then causes more harm to our community. So this educational piece where we bring Jacob in and Alderville group, Rob Stevenson, all the ones who are familiar with this cannabis and the cannabis stores to share their input and knowledge of what they have to go through and what they're doing. And again, us as leadership to continue to support our law enforcement and our community, get your guys' input on what you want to do to move forth on this. So that was one of the main purposes of this community information session, was to give an educational piece and to try to give individuals an open insight of what cannabinoids are, CBDs, marijuana, and to hear from you what you want to do to move forth on this, which the survey and the purpose of that, as it's going to be distributed out after this community session, and we'll review all of that information and present it to community again, and it's going to take a while before we're going to get moving on this. It's not like we're going to start next month where we're going to say, okay, let's have a vote. We still got to create all of this information and present it to community. Okay, what do you think about this? Just like what Jacob said. If you're not happy with that, we'll take it back and review it and edit everything, amend everything. So it's still a long process. And this is just a starting of education pieces on what you want to do.
Miguel. I just wanted to make 3 points. Number one, this is good to have consultation. I wish we had consultation on more issues other than this, other important issues to the community. So that's point one, that we need more discussion. Number two, I don't know, I don't understand. I saw the headline banning we can't order from the store. I wish the council would take consideration of people's human rights. In human rights, I worked on collective human rights. Our Indigenous rights are collective rights. We hold them together. Now, what the white man always pushes on us is their individual rights, their right to property. That's their biggest concern, it seems, because they worship property. But the thing is, we do have human rights, and I don't know what, if we're going to be making laws, we have to take those into account too, the individual human rights. How can you force someone to retire when they're 65? The only way we could change it is to go to court, and who can afford that? When we saw the case, how long it takes to go to, you have to take it all the way, and then it would cost millions, and probably take 10 years. Generally on these type of issues. But that's an individual human rights case. That's the only way we could change it if we wanted to. I don't know if people want to. I don't know. But the other thing is, the same thing with this store. It's a violation of human rights. Somebody could take us to court and say, hey, you're violating my human right. All other Canadians can do this and I can't. That's an individual human right. But what we have to watch is the government uses individual human rights, which are fine and laudable, but they can sometimes undermine collective rights. For instance, they're doing that right now in the United States. Corporations have all the rights and privileges of a citizen. It's really scary what's going on in terms of the concentration of money in only certain people's hands. But if we don't recognize it, then we just go along. But we need income, we need jobs. So hopefully there's opportunities. The third point, though, I wanted to make was that we need to find opportunities and pursue them and not let people kill the opportunities. We've had several opportunities in the past, and I know they were controversial, but I'm beginning to wonder. We're a community of over 7,000 members, so we shouldn't let a group of 20 or 30 people organize their relatives to kill something that everybody else wants. I'm not saying that was the case or is the case, but you know, we just got to watch out. So anyways, for the good of everyone, miigwech.
Yeah, I'm just going to share a couple little points, and then Was Swabano will share some also. With the OCS, I believe some of the reasons why we didn't allow that, because again, there was nothing in place for us, and we didn't want this marijuana to get in the hands of our community members, the Children's Bill of Rights, which was passed. So we want to ensure the safety of our children that don't have access to this. So in order us as a community, through our CANNABIS win for us to create those laws to make sure there's protection for our community members, not just allowing it to be a free-for-all. So sure, people are saying we are violating their human rights by not allowing that, but again, us as a community, through our CANNABIS and ensuring the safety, our position as leadership to ensure the safety of community members, to ensure that we have all of this in place, have all of these laws in place, these regulations. People with got their medical card, they're still allowed to order that. So we didn't disallow that. But anybody who's doing it recreationally, you have to wait, unfortunately, until we get all of this in place for the safety of our community. So that was one of the main reasons why we did that. Oh, sorry. I'll get to you there, Frank.
Okay, so I'm just going to add on that. We had some confusion this afternoon with regards to some of these issues. So we talked this afternoon about a lot of these dispensaries being rated on reserve and things like that. And then it was nice because we had the police talk this evening to share their input in terms of recreational use. So this here, from a medical perspective, this is a list of medical cannabis dispensaries. So this has been around for a long time. So in terms of human rights, from a medical perspective, he just said that that is not being banned. What's being banned right now is the recreational use. So if you don't have your medical card, you can't order. So anybody who does have their medical card and who has been accessing for medicinal purposes, so a medical card is not something you just go and buy a membership or anything like that. It's actually prescribed by a doctor. So as a person at the health center, so I'm a nurse and I'm regulated through the College of Nurses. Just like our doctors, they're all regulated through the College of Physicians. So we have licenses that we need to protect. So if you come to us, you know, and you say, oh, I want medical cannabis or whatever, there's a process. So we have to send you, you know, a doctor has to refer you to a doctor who will prescribe medical cannabis, who's very knowledgeable. And these guys in the room here, they are very, very knowledgeable. So it's like not all of our doctors are going to prescribe medical cannabis. Like we have doctors who specialize in addictions, and then we have other ones that specialize in, like, say, cardiac, so your heart. Things like that, right? So not every doctor is going to prescribe this. So your doctor has to do a referral to a physician who will prescribe medical marijuana. A lot of it is done through OTN, so it's like FaceTime or video chat. So this here is what your product looks like. A lot of it, and he did talk about that, a lot of it comes in oil form because we don't want to be telling you to smoke something when it's not great for your lungs. So like this is an example, and this is a company that I'm very familiar with. I worked with this company a lot through CannaConnect with Veteran Affairs clients. So this is MedRelief. Okay, so when you look at MedRelief, so let's say you're on Setamin at midnight. So it tells you right in there on the label. So this one says THC 1 to 3 milligrams, CBD 2 to 4 milligrams. And then it'll tell you, so this one here, 27 to 31 milligrams per mil. So that's how many milligrams of CBD is in 1 mil. And then less than 2 milligrams per 1 mil for THC. So that's your dosage in that specific oil. Then if you look at the midnight, it's going to be different versus the Setamin. Does that make sense? So it's like if you're coming to your doctor and you're on Percocets, you know, and you're, you know, one person might be on 1 Percocet every 6 hours, where somebody else might have 1 to 2 every 4 to 6 hours. So that's your dosage. So these doctors prescribe that specifically for you and your symptoms. And then that's how your dose is figured out. And it comes with a label, your name, and everything, just like it does all your pills at the pharmacy. So, you know, it's going to be different if you're coming in and you have anxiety and you don't want to be on benzos, so you're trying this oil. You know, or if you have pain, they use it for clients with hepatitis to increase their appetites, so because they have a lot of weight loss and things like that. So it's all very individual. So there's no violation of human rights here because this medical marijuana has been around for a long time and these options have always been there. It's just been a stigma where people have shunned it because of the stigma attached to the recreational use, if that makes sense. So those options are there if people are serious about, you know, looking at exploring alternative medications, you know, they want to get off all their pain pills or, you know, the big cup of antidepressants and things like that for mental health, but there's a process and it requires referrals to other physicians. Does that make sense a little bit more? So this, you know, it kind of, people get confused between the health and medical stuff versus the recreational stuff. So as a nurse or a doctor, we can't tell you, oh, you can just go to the cannabis store, you know, and go and get what you want. I'm not allowed to do that because that's not, there's no physician at the medical or at the cannabis store. Does that make sense? It's like me telling you, okay, well, just go to LCBO and, you know, it should help. Like, I'm not allowed to do that. So hopefully that kind of clarifies things a little bit. That's just from a medical standpoint and our regulations that we have to follow, okay?
Okay. Ego Chwas. Okay, 5 minutes. And then just a couple of more questions, and then, yeah, because we got this individual here has to get going.
Honey, can I me go jump we could just get him on the bottom also. On the cannabis oil. This is my document for me to carry. I'm prescribed this. I went to see a doctor. I had cancer. I had diabetes. This cannabis oil, it helped me. It cured me. You know, these are all the stuff I carry is medical graded. It is good for you. It comes from Mother Earth. Anything that comes from Mother Earth will only cure you, not hurt you. You got to understand that. We already do that. I already do that. I make medicine. I make high blood pressure medicine from ironwood tree. I make sap from that big leaf. That good medicine. That chickpea from that medicine is good too. But this cannabis is good too. I just don't understand how it works. But it worked for me. If it works for me, it's going to work for a lot of people. I have a lot of people that are in their mid-60s, close to the 70s. Like, I'm not a doctor, but I know what I'm prescribing them, and I know how to prescribe it. And a lot of these people have arthritis. And they were tired of taking these pills. And these pills don't do nothing for you. I know because my dad took them for I don't know how many years. Over 50 years. Arthritis. These are doing nothing for you. You know? All Western medication. It made me sick. I took 5 different kinds of medication. I looked like a lobster. I was so bad. You know, my whole body was full of rashes from blood thinners, heart medication, everything. Till I went to this. I went to see this doctor. My doctor wouldn't prescribe it, so I just went ahead and went and seen another doctor. And he prescribed it. I told him, this is what this medication does to me. All this Western medication, it only hurts you. All these pills, these painkillers they prescribe you, they don't do nothing for you. All they do is bore holes in your body, makes you addicted. Of all the years I smoked marijuana, not once did I get addicted. I can quit. I quit to do this, and this is what I use. I'm allowed to use THC, 16 milligrams, 1.5 grams a day. This is a prescription for me. Any use can ask for this, get a prescription. If you really, truly need it to avoid the Western medication, I don't even take aspirin, take Winabel. I'll find my pressure point. Okay? You can rub that pressure point. You can literally rub that headache away. You just got to know your body. Last week, I felt my body up, looking for bumps. I found another one here. Right? It's good for your mint to feel yourselves up in the quill. Feel your breath. feel your lymph nodes. My lymph nodes are up here, lumpy. So it tells me I'm sick again. But I keep taking this, and I ain't gonna take no Western medication. I don't even like, I had an operation. Gitchinendum, oh, they took it out, my cancer's gone, kiddo. Gitchinendum, I felt good for my kids, my grandkids. A month later, body trauma hit me. Everything I did, Nishnabeyadzien, I dropped it. I almost went back to drinking after 17 years. That's what that body trauma did to me. I didn't like it. I didn't like my body being cut up. I got a pacemaker. I got a heart problem. You know? And I don't touch Western medication. I don't like it. That's the only thing that's wrong with that Western medication. They said it cures you, but it doesn't. I know for a fact it doesn't. We are allowed to hire 6 people, and we train these people to what this cannabis oils will do for you. We have everything listed. Everything, I got paper over there, you just have to look at it. Oh, there's my problem. This is what I need. THC. Oh, there's my problem here. CBD. You know, there's nothing wrong with this drug. The only thing wrong with this this weed, we abuse it. This is what's wrong with it. Just like beer. We watched our families. Our parents do it. So what do? We follow along. And today, our kids do the same thing. They see their parents, some of them crushing their pills. And the kids, I'm going to do that too. And then the kids see this. People injecting their arms with their painkillers. What's going to happen? They're going to do the same thing. I know, because I've seen it. You know, I did it. I see my parents getting drunk. By the time I was 15, 16, I started getting drunk. So it's just, what your kids see, they're going to follow you. So today, I don't drink no more, 17 years. You know? So what I do with my, I try to do with my kids is I let them walk beside me or in front of me so I can, no more. I teach them, you can't do that. You can't do this, you can't do that. But you can't tell your kid that when he's standing back here. You got to be beside him or in front of you. My kids helped me out. That's my biggest help there, is my kids, my grandkids. Yeah, miigwech.
Okay, miigwech, Danny. Well, unfortunately, we're going to have to wrap it up because we're already getting to a time where Jacob is going to have to head back. But again, there is going to be another time for us to all get together and come up with to see what your input is from the survey that's going to be handed out, and to see where the community wants to go with this cannabis. So the whole purpose of this was just to have an education about it, to have more awareness, and the whole purpose again is to get us prepared as to what you want to do. So with that, I want to give a little thank you here for Jacob.
Thanks, buddy.
All right, right on, man. Okay. Yeah, I'd just like to say thank you for everything for today, for coming down and again assisting us with this information session. Very knowledgeable in the area and well facilitating, and really wish you safe travels back, and we'll be in touch.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone.
So community, Chibigwesh, for coming out, and look out for those surveys, and we'll continue to work on this. Chibigwesh.
Who's that one for? Oh, Rob.